I feel like with so many people, we're in this culture of we only want to believe the things in our head and we want to continue to think that they're right. And if you have a different view, I don't want to educate myself anymore by listening to your view because I know I'm right. It's just, I don't know how we've gotten to this point of narrow-mindedness. Like, I want to learn. I almost want you to prove me wrong because then I can leave that conversation and be like, wow, I really learned something today. I can't believe that I had this view and somebody else totally debunked my thoughts or feelings or anything. And I don't know. I personally want to grow as a human, and I don't want to ever get to an age where I stop growing.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is a CrossFit host. She's the queen of hustle and the newest addition to the Talking Elite Fitness team. Between her experience with athlete interviews, behind-the-scenes clips, and the daily recap shows, today I'm excited to unpack the story of Lauren Kalil. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we can catch up. It's been a couple months since we've actually seen each other.
Yeah, totally. That's one of my favorite things about some of the different CrossFit events is crossing paths with people that I feel like I have a relationship with because I watch your work and I see you on YouTube and I read your stuff previously from Morning Chalk Up and I'm like, man, this person has something that I want to lean towards. And so it's incredibly rewarding and such an honor to cross paths with you today and share some of the behind the scenes of your story with our community today.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I mean, even the first time that we met in person, it was so weird because I feel like we both kind of felt like we knew each other because we've both been in the space. We follow each other on Instagram, all of those little things. And it's just nice to, again, share space with somebody who has similar values, mindset, and, you know, all those things that make for good people.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing that I think is really cool is everybody knows people for the thing, right? Like whatever the bio is on Instagram or whatever the thing is on LinkedIn. And that stuff's cool, but it's also like, hey, let's peel back the layers of the onion a little bit. You know, what are not just the peaks, but what are the valleys? What are some of the things that you've navigated that have helped sharpen your sword so that way you can keep carving a path for yourself? Because you and I both know this media path isn't like follow steps 1 through 10 and it's going to get you to the destination. It's like, well, you do step 1 and then you're like looking for step 2.
I don't think that there's any steps or any, and again, I'm not a parent, but I almost feel like the industry is like being a new parent. You have like these books that you read and they kind of tell you how to do the thing, but then you get thrown out to do the thing and you're like, which way is up? Which way is down? Yeah, totally. How does this work?
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned it a little bit when we were discussing things offline that your gut knows. And I know for me personally, and I can share some of the story a little bit later, but there was some sort of calling, like a whisper around, wow, I really enjoy connecting with people. I really enjoy creating a safe space to allow them to share their story that maybe nobody knows about. They just know about the outcome. And for you, kind of integrating your way into the media space, especially early on, what was that gut instinct? What was your stomach saying? And how did you ultimately make the choice to be like, man, that whisper in my ear is getting louder. I got to make a move.
Oh, yeah. So I've always been curious with people and what are their stories and what are the stories that they're not telling, or maybe that they don't have a platform to tell their story. And I've just always had this interest of asking the hard questions or asking the deep questions. What's beyond the surface? So many people know whatever we present to them. But what are those things that maybe only like the intimate family members or friends know about people? And I've just really tried to have conversations like that with whether it's athletes or when I worked in local television. I've tried to bring that out of people. I want those to feel like they're just over at my house. We're sitting on the couch drinking coffee or in the backyard having a barbecue. And what are some of those conversations that you would have with your close circle? And when I got out of local television, I mean, my gut told me that I didn't belong there anymore. And not because anybody necessarily was making me feel that way, but I just kind of knew my time was up. I wasn't passionate about it the way that I thought I once was. And I wasn't telling stories that got me out of bed in the morning. I was literally getting up every day and like, man, I have 5 sick days to use. I think today is going to be one of those sick days. And I would never actually use them. It would just be this thought in my head of, I really want to call in today. I don't know that I want to do this or can do this. And I mean, that went on for, gosh, maybe 2 years, where I knew in my gut that this was not going to be a long-term thing for me. And a lot kind of happened that solidified it until eventually I just knew that I couldn't sign another contract. Because for those who don't know, television, local TV, you're always under contract. And with a lot of the companies, if you break that contract, whether you leave early or you want to get out of the industry or move, they will take you to court and sue you for way more money than you've ever made in local TV. So I knew that I had to get through the next contract. And at that point, we'll kind of figure out what happens after that. And it came down to, I didn't have anything lined up when I ultimately left the local news station. And this was at 29 years old. I'm unemployed. I had the part-time job with Morning Chalk Up, just kind of writing a couple articles on the side, and it was about to be in the middle of the CrossFit season. So luckily I could pump out a little bit more volume, and we were, paid based on the articles that we wrote. So I tried to make that last along with some money that I had saved. But there was this huge identity crisis. Like, television and broadcast was all I knew for almost a decade at this point. And I had my parents who are super supportive, but they were kind of looking at me, and they both cried when I left TV. They're like, but you're so good at it. You're so natural on camera. Like, we feel like this is your future. And I'm just like, you guys are crazy. It's not. It, like, the bad outweigh the good. I love being a journalist. I love storytelling, but the lifestyle and the stories that I'm telling, they just don't fill my cup. They once did, and because all of like the shifting and changing and management and the culture was a huge part of it. Just, it wasn't, my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I'm a firm believer that as soon as your heart is checked out of something, you're not giving 100% anymore. Even if you kind of trick yourself and think, well, I'm trying really hard. I'm still producing good stories, but you kind of get lazy in your writing or whatever the craft is. And you're like, yeah, this is going to be good enough for today. And to me, that never feels great. When I go to bed at the end of the day, I want to know that I gave it my all and I tried my best. Even if it's ultimately not my best work, I tried my best. I put in the effort.
Really counts.
100%. The effort.
I love that you described it that way, around just really leaning into what your heart desires. And even though you might be good at something, or the public perception is something, if the culture isn't sitting right with you, inevitably, as we discussed previously, achievement without fulfillment isn't really success, because your heart, your soul, your mind, those three things don't synergize into peace. You're constantly, for CrossFit energy systems and nervous system discussion, you're constantly in this, sympathetic spot. You're never able to get parasympathetic. You're always operating probably out of fear instead of out of love. And then inevitably, it's probably 70% of your peak expression. Trident Coffee is sponsoring this episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. My guys over at Trident taught me something really important this last year: that we are all a bundle of stories, both good and bad, and everything in between. At Trident, they're storytellers. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They help create connections through symbology and storytelling that engage their customers on an emotional level, and this distinguishes them from other coffee brands. You can find Trident in Imperial Beach and in Coronado. They offer over 14 plus nitro cold brews along with dairy-free options. you can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from their keto bakery. All these options will allow you to support your health and fitness journey with Trident Coffee. They're more than just a coffee company. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Once again, that's tridentcoffee.com. Use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Take your coffee experience to the next level. Two important factors for us over at Invictus Mindset are true care and attention to detail. My friends over at RX Smart Gear have been bringing innovative fitness tools to the market since 2009. From their award-winning Evo speed ropes to their amazing gymnastics grips to their line of inflatable fitness equipment, they're constantly looking to problem solve within the fitness industry. They're always allowing us to have our gear work for us rather than against us. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use discount code Invictus Mindset to shop their latest cutting edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you. And for me, that I'm hearing from you is the courage that you had to listen to that. And also the bravery to be like, man, I know that if I walk away now, it's going to elicit more legal problems and monetization problems. So I really have to stick it out. My actions have to follow what my word said, even way after the feeling that I signed that contract in has shifted and moved. And I think that's kind of the definition of character, right? Like, not only is it who are you when nobody's watching, but when you say you're going to do something and you're in this bubbly mood and you're all excited about the new opportunity and the paychecks that are to come and the validation and the identity upgrade, and then all of a sudden you get a peek behind the curtain, you realize it's not what you thought it was. The narrative isn't playing out the way you thought it would. And then inevitably you're stuck. And being stuck, in my humble opinion, is probably a form of hell's waiting room.
Ooh,
and the ability to make
analogy.
Good decisions in the midst of, quite frankly, a big clusterfuck, mentally, physically, and emotionally, is like, all right, like I know this isn't for me. I got to stick it out. I don't really have the next plan, but I do know that my skills are really good and they'll be transferable into another arena. And I just think it's a really cool narrative that is the Lauren Kalil story.
But it's crazy when you talk about the skills, because I'm not kidding you. When I basically had this conversation with my news director and I told him I was not re-signing, and then, I went home, I probably had a good cry. I thought about, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm losing a 401k. I'm losing healthcare. I'm losing a steady income. But as I was laying in bed, I remember thinking, what skills do I have? I don't know how these are going to be transferable. And now that sounds so silly because just working with people in general gives you such great skills. And working on deadlines, and you cannot be late to the 5 o'clock news because it's going to start with or without you. And if you're not sitting in that chair reading the headlines and the top stories, the people at home, they're going to call into the news station and that's not going to be good. But it's just crazy to me because I thought I had no skills. And looking back at that, I don't know if maybe I was just like so deep in the unknown and what am I doing and questioning myself and having this identity crisis that it was just overwhelming with negative thoughts, but never to this day. And I always thought that there's going to be a point in time where I'm going to look back and be like, man, I kind of miss local TV. There was not a single day, minute, hour, second that I have ever missed it. And there's something so sweet about that. You know what I mean? I feel like
100%. You squeeze the juice all the way out of the orange.
Yeah, there's no regret. I don't feel like there was anything that I thought, man, I wish I could have stayed a little bit longer to have this opportunity or to have this experience. I'm like, nope, I did everything that Lauren could do to the best of my ability, and I left when I needed to. And there was a lot of uncertainty for, I would say, I was unemployed for a month, but I would say the first week was hard. And then after that, I mean, maybe not even a full week, maybe realistically like a day. And then I turned the mindset around and I'm like, Lauren Kalil is not going to sit at home and just like relax here. This isn't a vacation. We're going to make sure that I figure out what I need to do and what the next steps are and what's going to fill my cup.
That's so cool. The other thing that I'm hearing here is that the pain of suffering is way better than the pain of regret, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
you endured the last little bit, and that really exhausted everything you had, where you got to test out all the flavors. You got to be like, you know what? Maybe it's not the position. Maybe it's me. I'm going to lean into this. I'm going to dot every single I, cross every single T. And at the end of the day, it's like, wow, this doesn't really feel like art anymore. Now it feels like work. And the other takeaway that I'm hearing, and this is a fun discussion for the two of us to have, but
Ooh.
So much of the world is marketing, right? And I feel like when you're doing something that is really what your heart desires, it's hard to explain what you're doing, right? Like, I talk to people for a living. Sometimes that's in a coaching space. Sometimes that's in a podcasting space. Sometimes that's brands. Sometimes that's healthcare. Sometimes that's just person to person. But when you say it like that, it sounds really easy. And I mean, I call it almost like the Joe Rogan effect, where it's like Rogan is just wanting to talk to interesting people. And then it's eliciting all this magic that's floating to the surface. I think sometimes when you come to the table with resume like verbiage of I do this, I have this skill, I have that skill, at least for me, it's like, that's really awesome. But like, that's all surface level bullshit. Like, how do we get below that to talk about your deeper meaning? What are you actually trying to do? What is the purpose here? What is your connection? Aside from all the tangible items, how do you make people feel? Is there a safe space? Is there something that's actually moving the needle? Because you and I can both agree in this storytelling journey, there's something to this human experience that words don't really quantify very well. It's a feeling that you have. You and I had never met, but we saw each other and we were like, there's a connection here. Let's have a cool conversation. And it was something around respect. It was something around the angle of storytelling, maybe the type of conversations that are had. And it was a safe space of like, that person gets it. And I don't know, when you do that, you don't really have to sell yourself. You don't really have to have these crazy, like, highlighted skills. It's just like, you are who you are and you add value wherever you go.
And kind of to that point, and maybe I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but even when I recently was hired by Talking Elite Fitness, Charlie
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. It's, oh my gosh, it's like, I can't stop smiling when I think of, you know, how I got here. But so Talking Elite Fitness is a branch under Hamilton Road Production that's owned by this man, Charlie Doobie. And I will never forget when we were on one of our initial Zoom calls and kind of talking about, like, is it possible for me to like start working for them? Like, how are we going to make this relationship work? And within the first 30 seconds, I kind of caught myself selling myself, like, hey, these are my skills. These are the things I can do. And he was like, whoa, wait. The reason why we're having this conversation is because I already know that you can do those things. Like, you've made yourself marketable in this space. I just want to have a human to human conversation right now. And I was just like, that's so interesting, because for any job that I've ever had before my current one, I feel like I've always had to kind of sell myself and almost prove why I deserve the job that I'm applying for, asking for, whatever way it was. And this career, this job that I have right now, I didn't need to do that. And just that in itself made me feel like it was 100% the right choice.
Like, you're enough.
Yeah. I mean, looking at local television, there's so many rabbit holes I can go down, but you truthfully have to sell yourself. You have to change yourself to be in this mold of how they want you to be. I mean, it comes down to, I had to have my hair cut at a certain length because, like, they don't like if you can't if the camera cuts it off where you can't see the end of the hair, that was a rule for whatever reason. I don't know if the viewers at home then just don't, that's weird that they can't see the end of your hair, but like from rules to that, from rules to getting approval anytime I wanted to have my hair color slightly changed, to not getting positions because my personality was too big, is what I was told once. And, you know, they're looking for a man for this position, or they're looking for a brunette for this position. And it was just this constant, I'm trying to change myself to be what the mold is. And now there's this huge feeling of relief that I can be 100% authentic. And that's all I've ever wanted to be. I find that you have better connections with people if they feel like you're being authentic. So what's the purpose of going through life and putting on a front or fitting a mold just to get that job you want? I want to be in a job and a career where it's celebrated to be yourself. And I totally feel like I'm finally in a position where I can do that. And that's so cool to me.
Yeah, for sure. That should absolutely be celebrated. Going back to that, the rules and regulations, I think it's that way because they're seeking control, because they want to scale and they want to make it repeatable. And I think, at least in my humble observation, viewing the world, they want to understand how to clone Lauren Kalil. So if you're completely authentic, they don't know how to make that repeatable. And so inevitably, it makes it really harder for the next person to follow suit because you may carry characteristics and, you know, things that are very valuable that they can't exactly quantify. And then there's not certain regulations that allow them to provide a step-by-step process to be like, hey, you have to look like this, you have to talk like this, and blah, 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 blah. And quite frankly, you and I can both pick up right away if somebody's reading off a teleprompter. It doesn't feel, It does not feel good. And huge props to Hamilton Roads Productions, because I know in some instances you have to use a teleprompter, especially with like statistics and data analytics and certain things associated with the complexities of CrossFit and the other sports that they follow. So I understand its value sometimes. But I also understand that when it's human-to-human connection, that fake facade does not lead to a better product. And I mean, humbly, just throwing that out there, I mean, I'm no expert, but I definitely can feel the difference. And it's really cool to be a fanboy over here and watch you connect with two of the best to do it, Tommy Marquez and Sean Woodland, guys that I've had on the podcast before, guys I've crossed paths with consistently at events. We share a big hug. The three of us are part of Team Too Tall, and squatting sucks for all of us, so we just keep doing it.
You guys are all really tall.
Yep. We're on Team Too Tall for sure, and that's why we had to bring you into the mix to even us out a little bit.
I need to carry my box around just so if the four of us are in a circle, I don't need to look up at y'all the whole time.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I'm so happy for you that you're connecting with those guys. At least the energy that I feel from them, it is that. It's very authentic. I think, man, Tommy is just so good at statistics. Very similar to Brian Friend, just throwing out and spitballing all the different stats of these amazing athletes that are doing some really incredible things. And Sean's voice and ability to carry and organize the conversation is just, it's so cool. And so for you to join that squad is very cool, not just for me as a friend onlooking, but also for the entire community to know that you're strategically placed in a place now that allows you to shine bright and fully thrive where you're at peace, but also it's not work anymore. Now it's play again.
Oh, nothing that I do feels like work. When I'm about to, whether it's like doing research for my show or research for a studio show that we're doing, especially with all the semifinals previews or traveling to an event, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, man, I get to do these things today. I'm so excited. It's not like, oh, like I can't wait till the weekend. It's so insane to me just talking with other people and hearing how many say that throughout the week. Oh, it's Monday. Oh, I can't wait until the weekend. And I never catch myself saying that anymore. I know when I was in TV I did, and I never say it now. And it's like, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, totally. I was talking to Sam Dancer and Matt Bickle this week, and they're fortunately in San Diego for a little bit training. And we looked at each other and like, how cool is it that every day we get to go play with our friends? And I don't know, it's just like a cool thought process. You know, I'm very fortunate. I get to talk to cool people, and then I get to coach amazing friends and clients and Invictus members, and then go throw down with some friends as well. And it just makes my heart so happy when I get to see other people just going to play with their friends, doing things that really make them come alive. This episode is brought to you by HVMN, Health via Modern Nutrition. They launched the world's first ketone drink in 2017, and then in 2022 launched the version 2 of their exogenous ketone product line called Ketone IQ. I found that incorporating ketones into my morning routine increased my daily focus and energy. The beauty of this product is that you can stack it. It doesn't even have to replace your morning routine. My morning routine looks like taking the dog on a walk, hitting my daily shot of Ketone IQ, hopping in the cold plunge, and then finishing it off with a nice Trident coffee while I soak up some morning sunlight. Try out some ketones for yourself by using the code Invictus for 20% off Ketone IQ. Ketones are a super efficient fuel for your brain that leaves you feeling energized and clear-headed. Give it a shot. I promise you won't regret it. Once again, use code Invictus for 20% off Ketone IQ. Move fast and break shit. This is one of the core values at LSKD and something that we fully resonate with here at the Invictus Mindset Podcast. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. Through my experiences with LSKD products and their team members, I have found a brand that I can call home that keeps me performing at my highest level through fitness and business. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer, so I can go from training at the gym directly to meetings, client consults, running errands, or preparing for podcasts. The LSKB vibe has finally reached San Diego, and we want you to experience it too. Go to us.lskd.co to start shopping today. We want to inspire you to chase the vibe.
And that's what I love about the CrossFit space too, is you do get those like-minded people that are typically positive. They want to do hard things. And it's just, when I worked in local television, I even kind of think of my mindset, and every day that I would be sitting in the live truck with my photographer, we would never have productive, healthy conversations about life, really. Like, yeah, we knew about each other's families, but a lot of it was just sitting there bitching and complaining about how much we hated our job. And like, what a toxic environment to be in for almost a decade. And I'm just so thankful that I'm out of that, and now I'm surrounded by like-minded people. I mean, when me, Tommy, and Sean get together and have like a content meeting, for example, it's so cool how we can start with one very little minute idea, and then just the way that it grows through conversation and the way that each of us thinks, and, well, what if we do it this way, or what if this were to happen? And the three of us are really able to see all sides of the coin and play devil's advocate. Even if it doesn't necessarily fall in line with our opinion, we're able to see the other side. And I think that's so important when you want to have productive conversation and drive the conversation forward. You have to look at both sides and consider other variables. And I just feel really thankful that I get to work in an environment with that type of people.
Yeah, for sure. I think perspective is such a unique thing that gets thrown around in a very cliche way, but you have your view, I have my view. Maybe there's a bird's eye view. Maybe there's a zoomed out view. Maybe there's a drone view.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes taking that into consideration and humbly playing the contrarian perspective sometimes allows all the different angles to be presented. Because if you and I agree on everything, quite frankly, life is pretty boring. And then to take it a step even further, in those disagreements, there should be respect, and there should be a safe space to then listen to the other side of the conversation. I think sometimes emotion starts to bleed into the logic, and then as a byproduct, like the talking gets a little bit louder and then a little bit more disrespectful, a little bit more confrontational, and the hands start dancing. And it's interesting to see how communication takes place. And I love that you guys take the angle of perspective, because it's so easy in CrossFit to bitch about the logistics or the program design or he said, she said, location of this, location of that. And it's just fun to hear different angles from a very respectful, reputable source.
Well, and that's the thing. Like when we're offline, the three of us have conversations that sometimes emotions play into it, but we're able to know that, for instance, if I have a very different view on something than Sean or Tommy, they're going to listen to me and they're going to ask questions. And even if we don't come to an agreement, we at least are like, okay, I understand why you see it that way. I don't necessarily agree, but that's good perspective that I wouldn't have had if we didn't have this conversation. And that's what's really nice, is just finding people who you can have a healthy disagreement with, and everybody just leaves the conversation with more knowledge. Why? I really don't understand why now I feel like with so many people, we're in this culture of we only want to believe the things in our head, and we want to continue to think that they're right. And if you have a different view, I don't want to educate myself anymore by listening to your view because I know I'm right. It's just, I don't know how we've gotten to this point of narrow-mindedness. Like, I want to learn. I almost want you to prove me wrong, because then I can leave that conversation and be like, wow, I really learned something today. I can't believe that I had this view and somebody else totally debunked my thoughts or feelings or anything. And I don't know. I personally want to grow as a human, and I don't want to ever get to an age where I stop growing. And I think that placing yourself with people who feel that way too is how you keep growing.
I'm thinking of this in real time. You've unlocked and the wheels are spinning now, so this conversation's going to dance. I'm excited for it.
We are on the highway.
Yeah, I dig it. I think maybe an element of imposter syndrome might play a role, because the world is gently looking for experts. And when you show that you may not have the answer, or you're not necessarily an expert, but you're in the hot seat and holding the microphone, I think sometimes the world is like, oh, you're a flip-flopper. You don't actually have an opinion. You like to play both sides. And I think it's okay to have a stance that's not necessarily like polarizing on one side or the other, but maybe somewhere close to the middle with that open-minded perspective that you said of like, man, like if that person brings a really cool argument to the table, I'm malleable enough to move a little bit closer to their side. But inevitably, I think there's this strong stance that I think goes into the psychology of public image, where if I show that there's any bit of vulnerability, it's going to deconstruct my credibility. And I don't view it that way. Somebody asked me, I was on somebody's podcast earlier this week, and they were like, who's Bryce Smith? And I was like, well, a professional mistake maker and a lifelong learner. If I claim to be like a know-it-all, it's like, I'm going to screw it up every single time. And I think if more people humbly shared that, there'd just be less bullshit and more truth that's then floating, because you and I both know this world is made up. CrossFit is a made up sport, just like every other sport out there. Everybody is simply doing the best they can to kind of figure it out. And like, how cool is it if we collectively come together and share ideas and allow the best ones to float to the surface without allowing too much emotion or ego to float in? And I say too much because I do think those things can be used as a tool, like a really good tool, but too much dosage of it allows it to become too controversial and messy.
Yeah. And you make a really good point, because I do feel like people and society, if you come out and say an opinion on something or a strong feeling, and then you go back and change your mind at some point, oh my gosh, people's heads want to pop off. And I'm like, why am I putting myself in a box where I can never change my mind or opinion? I can continue to be educated, and maybe that's why I changed my mind. And I will never forget, I had this boss who during the interview process, I didn't think this question was weird at the time, but then after speaking with my family and maybe some other people, I realized it was a very strange question. He asked me, what is the percentage of time that you are the smartest person in the room? And I was like, that's an interesting question. I don't know, like 15 to 20%. And he said to me, it should be closer to 95%. And okay, you're right. I have the feeling that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because then I'm probably in the wrong room. I want to continue to surround myself with people who have views and ideas and educate me, sure, on certain topics or certain skills. Maybe I have more knowledge about something, but being the smartest person in the room all the time, gosh, that seems like a pretty boring life.
The thing that came to mind for me is, like, if somebody was asking me, hey, Bryce, what are steps 1 through 10? I'd probably find like step 1.5, 7.6. Like, I'm the person that likes to look between the lines a little bit. And my first thought process around that question is, how do you quantify smart? Right? Like, as an interviewer, you might have a little bit more time that you spend in that arena. You might have more knowledge in certain landscapes of life just on sheer curiosity that you might possess in one category over another. Does that quantify being smarter? I don't know, right? Like, so like the ego associated with assigning a percentage based on smartness, it's like, I don't know, like, how do you really quantify that? If you're in a room, there's probably people in the world of finance, there's people in journalism, there's people in fitness, there's people in real estate. Like, how do you play that game? I would probably argue that your open-mindedness should be 95%, that your curiosity should lie there, that your humble observation of what's going on in the room and the reading of body language and the feeling of energy and emotional intelligence should be very high, because that allows you to better connect with people. But at the same time, like, I don't know. I mean, I look at some of the best to do it, and they know a very small amount about a lot of things. Are they the smartest? Or are they the best generalist? I mean, you look at the fittest on earth. Like, you put them on a basketball court with LeBron, and they're going to get annihilated. But then all of a sudden in their sport, they're phenomenal. So are they the fittest? I don't know. Like, our version of I mean, I see it in so many CrossFit gyms. We do it every day, arguing who's more athletic. And it's a conversation that goes in circles. Who's the smartest? It goes in circles. And I think that's not the best question. I think you can ask a better question. I think it's a very judgmental perspective that doesn't allow for growth. And inevitably, I mean, you and I can read 100 different Instagram captions. I would argue that a high percentage of them would be around growth. Growth kind of means that we're not the same that we were previously, which means there needs inevitably to be a little bit of change. And if we're staying the same in that stagnation, going back to our previous discussion, hell's waiting room. Not cool.
I don't want to be there.
Not at all. Lauren, I'm really curious. Like, you're such a great public speaker. You do an amazing job allowing for what I kind of categorize the Jordan Peterson pause, and like allow your thoughts to process, which I really respect, because I tremendously struggled with that in the beginning. I felt like every space had to be filled. But how did you find...
I've been there too.
I think all of us have. And I think as you get more comfortable with like, let me let that sit for a moment, let the wheels spin. And then occasionally, like we just did, like we'll speak in real time.
Yeah.
But then other times it's like, I've been here before. This is kind of familiar territory. We have stories and ideations we can share. But what I'm really interested in with you is, how'd you find your way into public speaking? I could be wrong, but I think that's one of the number one fears in the world. And it seems to be something you're very comfortable with, and obviously have honed and groomed that skill over time.
Oh man, I I'm probably not the majority because I love it. It's not about the people watching. I just love entertaining. I've always been an entertainer. I grew up, so my mom, she owns a dance studio, and she was the one that has always encouraged me. Find something that you're absolutely passionate about and you can make money doing it. My mom always instilled that into me because she was a dancer. She loved it. She opened up her own business. And now, gosh, maybe 35, maybe her studio's been open for about 35 years. And she's still doing it. But so I grew up, I think I was 3 years old, and that was my first dance recital. I continued to perform and dance all through college, competitions, what have you. When I was maybe between like 8 and 10, we went to New York City, and I had to go see the NBC studio. I had to watch the Today Show, and then, okay, Mom, please take me here. Like, there's a green screen there. You can stand in front of it. And I would stand in front of it and pretend that I'm doing the weather. And, oh, look over here, it's raining and there's a tornado in Kansas. And I just, I could not get enough of just performing and having people like smile or laugh or the whole bit with it. And I even look at, in college, I actually was on student government, and I was the student body president. I gave a speech at graduation, and I just always enjoyed that. And I think that certainly helped me in journalism because, give me a microphone and give me a topic and I'll figure out how to talk about it for 3 to 10 minutes, whatever you need. And honestly, that's a skill that a lot of people need to learn, but for me, it was just natural. I'll never forget, the teleprompters went down one day, and I have my producer in my ear, and they're like, okay, we're going to run video of the Pope. You just got to talk about the Pope until the teleprompters come back. And God, I was so grateful that my parents put me through Catholic high school, elementary school. I went to a Catholic university. I was like, thank God, quite literally, for this. But yeah, somehow I just made it work, and I watched the video and found things to talk about. And I'm sure it wasn't all completely accurate, but you kind of make it work in the heat of the moment. But public speaking has always just been fun for me. I don't know why. I really don't know why, but
it's cool to see how you come alive when I just say the word public speaking, and it's just humbly been a part of your life for a very long time. How have you grown to be okay with the imperfections that come with performing and public speaking, like the analogy that you just gave, or when you've been with like Dex Hopkins, an amazing guy, a lot of knowledge, and like his kids get involved, and like I love that. I love the messiness of like the screen pausing, when you're communicating with somebody remotely, or the audio goes out, or shit happens, right? And I think that that's great because it's part of the human experience. Like, I'm at the gym having a conversation with a client, somebody interrupts, and you turn your head and you're over here, and then all of a sudden you have this thing to worry about. It's like, that is what encompasses this human navigation that we're trying to play in.
It used to stress me out because I am somebody who has, especially, I would say not so much with my personal life. With my personal life, I'm really spontaneous and I'm all over the place and I'm very fluid. But professionally, you should see my Google Calendar. If it's not in there, I'm probably not going to show up to it because I won't remember. I love having everything organized, and there's a lot of structure. And it comes down to, from this time to this time, I eat breakfast and I listen to my podcasts. Like, it's truthfully like clockwork, my life now. But when I was, it was kind of like the early days of being in television. I just learned that you can plan as much as you want, but the newscast is never going to go the way that you want it. There's going to be technical difficulties. I mean, there were times where I was live in the field, and you learn this the hard way, that when a camera is pointed at you, you should always pretend like it's live, because sometimes your producer doesn't give you a heads up and you're on camera having a side conversation when they expect you to do the news report. So, I mean, just from silly examples like that, you learn the hard way that things are not going to be perfect. And now I'm way more comfortable with the imperfections of, you make great points about, people's internet being laggy or their microphone going out. And I do think that kind of adds the realness to what we do. And it gives the viewers or the listeners a peek behind the curtain of, yeah, you might think that, like for me, I'm like, I cannot believe that Bryce is asking me to be on his podcast, because I look up to you as somebody who's really well known in the space. You have a lot of super interesting guests. And again, back to imposter syndrome, I kind of think, well, why me? I'm not interesting. I just hang out with my dogs and I love to talk about CrossFit.
You want to hear something really funny on that note, though?
Yeah.
I'm such a writer, and I take notes like this that are real messy.
Oh, I
Every
love
single
that.
podcast that I do, I really believe that writing fills the gaps within our thinking.
Yeah.
And I don't have necessarily questions. I just have topics that I like to follow that I'm like, man, this is really interesting for Lauren. The best part about our conversation so far is I haven't touched any of that. This is all organic conversation that I think is fantastic. And it just goes to show that sometimes we have this perception of ourselves and we look at ourselves a certain way, and then it takes somebody else's view or perspective to be like, hey, I actually view you this way. And we can play ping pong and chop it up and talk about all these really cool, messy things associated with podcasting and broadcasting and public speaking and all these things. And it's so cool because it didn't follow the agenda that I had at all. And quite frankly, I don't care.
Those are the best conversations. Yeah. It's so funny because I also used to have very scripted out questions that I would ask people, and almost immediately you learn, okay, I'll have the first question and then I have no idea where the conversation is going to go.
Great.
But that just produces the best authentic conversation. And I feel like you really get to learn more about people when it's like that.
Yeah, for sure. LMNT, pronounced element, is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means a science-backed electrolyte ratio with none of the junk. No sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and most importantly, no BS. Whether it's after a long workout, hot yoga, or an intense sauna and ice session, I've been using LMNT to keep me hydrated and replenishing all of my lost electrolytes. So many of us wake up chronically fatigued, and the antidote to this is salt water. Salt has previously been blamed for blood pressure issues, but new research shows that replenishing salt and electrolytes can lead to more energy, no headaches, a clear mind, and enhanced focus. Use the link drinklmnt.com/Invictus Mindset to make any purchase of LMNT, and you will receive a free sample pack with all of the LMNT flavors. Once again, that's drinklmnt.com/Invictus Mindset. When you were hosting the Bottom Line with Morning Chalk Up, was there a conversation that you had that specifically stands out in your mind that you're like, wow, this is really what I meant to do, at least in this season of life? Was there one specific person or interaction that you had that really boosted your confidence of whoa, that person really came alive during our conversation, and I'm going to ride this wave out as long as I can?
I would say it wasn't necessarily a specific person or even topic, but I would say it was early on when I realized, I am messaging people who I consider very high up in the space to come on. And again, I don't necessarily think it was because I was hosting. I think it was because, Morning Chalk Up was a reputable source of news that people felt comfortable to come on, and then they get to know me later, and then I build the relationship through there. But I was a little bit just blown away that leaders in the CrossFit space were trusting me to facilitate a conversation about sometimes uncomfortable topics, but necessary topics. And I mean, when I would just look at some of the views on the YouTube videos and see them start to take off, because in my head I'm like, oh, whatever, maybe like 100 people are going to watch this. And then I think it was like the first video that I saw reach over 1,000. And then from there, I mean, it was on average between kind of at the peak. There were one of them, I think it might have been when Dave Castro got fired, his reached like 50,000 views. And in my head, I'm just like, holy cow. I understand it's about the topic too, and what the headline looks like and all of these things, but man, people are listening. People are coming to this platform to see what conversations we're talking about. And again, imposter syndrome, like, wow, what a cool feeling that I can help facilitate these conversations and hopefully drive impactful change within the sport and get people talking about some of those things that maybe coaches are talking about at their affiliate or with their athletes or what have you. But we can do this on a bigger space where people can watch and get educated, and we can make the sport better. That's really always been my goal. I love CrossFit. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. I truly have a passion for the methodology, for the sport, for the community, the affiliates, all of that. And if I can help make those things better, then I feel like I'm truthfully doing my job.
Yeah, totally. As a consumer, not knowing that much about Morning Chalk Up's reputability, I actually leaned in to the bottom line because I felt that you cared. I felt like it was more than just some attention-grabbing headline or some sort of controversial like Hiller Fit or Sivan thing that was, elicited to try to get clickbait. It felt like it was organic curiosity within the space. And then I also really liked that it wasn't always like super popular athletes or always like just athletes or just brands. It was also people that work behind the scenes, having people like Matt O'Keefe and Todd Melanie and some of these people that are working behind the scenes that are really helping move and evolve the sport that don't always get all the notoriety or the clicks or the likes or the validations. And how have you navigated some of the psychosomatic component of the pressures needing certain data analytics to try to continue to pursue growth and development of projects, while simultaneously thinking, if I'm just impactful and I continue to do the next right thing and ask really cool questions and deeply connect with people to help facilitate healthy conversation within the sport, we're doing what needs to be done. And that's the impact and the legacy that you want to have. But sometimes it's tough because there's pressure from brands and the umbrella that you may or may not be working underneath. And sometimes that changes the creativity, right? You always talk about like creatives when they're doing well monetarily and money's not an issue, they crush it. But then all of a sudden when they're dancing and they need to make a quick buck, that's when things aren't operating at their highest frequency.
It's hard for a number of reasons. So when I think of what I see on YouTube, or I mean, I'm a consumer myself, but also working in the space, I look to see what other channels' views are and what are videos that are getting a lot of views. And unfortunately, just with the way that consumers are, a lot of the high-rated views are clickbait. The title isn't a representation of the content inside the video. And to me, that just seems against my character. It's misleading. It could misinterpret possibly the athlete in a negative way that if I were the athlete and I saw X video with my name in the headline, but it was not factual, that would upset me. And I think of athletes with sponsorships and how that could negatively impact monetization for them. And I don't know. I suppose that maybe because of my television background, I'm just a little bit more critical about what the headline says and is it a good representation of the content that's in the video. And a lot of the time, that's not what gets people to click. I'm very well aware. And I personally hate writing headlines. I hate it. Back to even television when I would have to write a story headline. Gosh, I would have so many people double check my work before I would post it because it just, that's one of the things that truthfully does not come natural to me. But if I look at the show Death By that I do with Talking Elite Fitness now, the views are nowhere near what I would want them to be. And in my head, I'm curious why, because the people who I have on the shows, gosh, like the roster is a home run. But I think it's because maybe, and these are things that I'm working on with my team. It could be the headline. It's just not catching people because there's other things that are possibly catching people that we have on the internet. Or it could be the thumbnail, the image that you see is not necessarily clicking people or grabbing people rather. But to me, it's not the immediate gratification. I'm here to play the long game. I don't want people to click on the video just because they're like, oh, look at that headline. Because I'm not looking to be in the space for a year or two. I want to be in the space for, gosh, what am I now? I'm 31. I would love to retire in the CrossFit space. 70 or I don't even know if people retire anymore, but I'm looking for a long, sustainable life where eventually the views will come and you kind of just have to put your head down and keep grinding and know that at the end of the day, having credibility and trust with people in this community is way more important than a quick couple thousand likes or views on a video that is attention seeking but doesn't have longevity. And that's what I'm looking for.
I really appreciate you sharing that. It's an interesting thought process. I mean, when you think about success for people of this generation, it's those that can endure the pursuit of delayed gratification. And that's not so sexy because you look at the NFL, which really stands for not for long. You look at CrossFit. The average career of a CrossFitter is probably what? Like high level, most people probably 2 to 3 years, to be honest. I mean, there's a few that have defied that for sure. Becca Voigt, Nuna Costa, a few others. Those just happen to be at the top of mind because they're good friends. Rich, obviously.
Annie Thorisdottir.
Yeah, Annie Thorisdottir, to name another one. Like they're all doing amazing things, and they obviously have a team that's there to support them. But there's an interesting thought process around like infinite versus finite. And finite, in my opinion, is like you kind of step on everybody in pursuit of that peak expression in the short term. You don't really care who you hurt, who you offend. You're just trying to get the thing in the short term so you can use that monetization to go do something else. Could be a form of success for some people. Is it trustworthy, honest, credible? I don't know. And then you have the infinite pursuit, which is just that slow, consistent drop, right? Like we're trying to do this across a lifespan. We're trying to be honest. We're wanting to give rather than take. And a few things come to mind. And my father said this before he passed away in 2018. He said, in life, you're going to have givers and you're going to have takers. The givers sleep better at nighttime. And that's something that's always really stood out to me. And I don't know. I think in this space, it's easy to give in. It's easy to chase validation and to go after that shiny object. And it may work in the short term, but if you're hurting people in the process and ruining relationships and jeopardizing people's careers, I don't know. That's not the most high integrity way of living, in my opinion. And you've probably heard it before. It's one of my favorite stories. The one around the Cherokee. Have you heard about that before? The
No,
Cherokee
I don't
and the
think
wolf?
I've heard this one. No.
So this little boy, they're both part of the Cherokee Indian tribe. And this little boy goes to his grandfather and he says, Grandpa, tell me a story. And he goes, you know, son, inside all of us is two wolves. One of those wolves is honest and loves and gives great advice and tries to live to the best of their ability while doing the next right thing. And the little boy goes, okay, well, who's the other wolf? And he goes, the other wolf lies, cheats, and steals in pursuit of immediate gratification and doesn't do the right thing when nobody's watching and has just greed and personal pursuits. And the little boy goes, okay, but which wolf wins? And the grandfather says, the one that you feed.
Wow. Oh, I just got chills.
That's one of my favorite stories. I actually have the wolf tattooed on me. And I don't know, you think about that, right? Like, are we continuing to feed the right wolf with our actions? And I think if you take that mindset into everything that you do, inevitably, there's room and space for all tides to rise.
What sticks out in my head, because as we're talking about clickbait and headlines, there is one headline that was on one of my bottom line episodes, and I don't remember 99.9% of the headlines, but I will never forget this one because I was in a content meeting about it, and the title that somebody came up with was, "Is Sarah Sigmundsdottir past her prime?" was the thought for the headline. And I gave so much pushback because I said, yes, we asked that question in the conversation with the folks on the bottom line. I know Chase was on it, and I'm trying to think of, I can't remember who else was on it, but it was a super productive conversation. They brought stats to the table. They talked about her performances, and ultimately they said, a healthy Sarah is a fierce Sarah. If she can stay healthy, then absolutely not. And so anyways, I ultimately said, I do not think that is the correct headline for the video. I think it's a little bit misleading and a little bit, I don't know, like for me, I'm just not flashy in those ways. And it just seems like a clickbait headline. Pushback. Ultimately, the video goes live and I'm sitting there and we talk about our gut will tell you how you should feel and what is right and what is not. And my gut just, and then I see the comments on YouTube and they're acknowledging that my gut was correct. Why would you put a headline like that? Sarah's one of the nicest athletes. And I try not to get into the emotion of, athletes' personalities in the sense of whether we're going to talk about them or not. If you're talking about their athletic performance, that is completely valid. I think that there are conversations on the internet with athletes that, you know, talk about the athlete's body, talk about the athletes in sexual ways that is just gross in my opinion. That's a whole other topic. But it just made me feel the way that my gut told me I should feel. And I probably cried about it, to be honest, because I was like, this was against what I view as okay. And from there on, I was like, the only way that I'm going to continue the YouTube channel is if I have ultimate say in the headlines. My face is on this. My name is on this.
Your reputability for sure.
Right. And I'm close with a lot of the managers in the space because I work with them through the athletes. And I remember Sarah's manager, Snorri Barron, and messaging me about it and him just saying, I don't necessarily know that he said that he was disappointed, but it was something along those lines. And it almost just felt like when I was a kid again and you do something wrong and your parents are like, I'm not mad at you, but I'm disappointed. And I couldn't fault him for that. I was like, I totally appreciate you being honest and telling me that because I feel the same and you're right. I should have put my foot down and changed the headline. So now every time that I make a headline, I'm very cautious about what it says and how it could be portrayed because I never want people to think that what I'm doing is for clicks. I'm doing this to help the sport. And as soon as I leave my true north, that's when you just lose authenticity.
Yeah. I almost think a better headline would have been like, what's next for Sarah Sigmund's daughter?
Yeah, for sure.
It leaves it open. It's not judgmental either way. And somebody said this to me the other day, allow your gut to be your compass. And that really stood out to me. And I think it kind of summarizes a lot of what we've discussed in the last few moments. Let's jump into the CrossFit space a little bit. We're about to embark on semifinal season, which means quite a bit of travel, quite a bit of moving parts.
Get your sleep in now.
Yeah, lots of dancing going on in the space. Anxieties are going to start to rise a little bit. Movement standards are going to be a question. Floor layouts, questioning of program design with things like pirouettes being thrown in. The logistics of the team competition. The first year, Rich kind of stepping away from formal competition. And there's a lot going on. But before we dive into that, I know you discussed it a little bit with Tommy and Sean on Talking Elite Fitness around the challenges in the business of CrossFit and the CrossFit layoffs. And, aside from, that being very challenging for those personal employees that are now navigating the unemployment world, which I know Sean and Tommy and the Buttery Bros and other close friends of the both of us have navigated before. What does that mean for the sport, right? Like, it sends a message a little bit that, I don't know, like, leadership's a little shaky. We all hope that's not the case because we love the sport. We love seeing it continue to grow and the opportunities that are unfolding for athletes and everybody else associated. But what are your knee-jerk reactions associated with some of these changes?
Yeah, first, I want to express empathy to those who were laid off. I can't imagine, especially with those who have families and kids and have other humans to be responsible for. Secondarily, I just wish that CrossFit would hold a press conference. I'm not even saying that it needs to be this long, extensive thing, because I do understand as soon as you start doing press conferences, you are opening yourself to criticism and to answering questions that are probably going to be uncomfortable, especially based on how open the press conferences would be to media and how we're defining who is media, who isn't, who gets a seat at the table, and all of those things that come with it. So I do respectfully understand the challenges that could come with holding press conferences. But I fall into the boat that the more transparency that we could have to understand what goes on, the better and the more buy-in you're going to have for people. I am somebody that if I believe in it and I kind of have an understanding of what's going on, I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. Like, if you come out and say, yep, this is why we did that, this is the vision, we're going to be open to questions, even if they don't necessarily give me the answers that I want, I can leave that press conference and be like, okay, they answered some hard questions. It's not really what I wanted or expected, but at least they gave an opportunity to inform. So the problem, in my opinion, of having this announcement to affiliates, then it obviously got around because a lot of people in the space are affiliate owners or, discuss with affiliate owners, is that it was to us, it was sudden, but I don't know if it was sudden. And to me, knowing that answer would give me a better idea of the landscape at hand. Like, is this something that, oh my gosh, we made within a week's time because it was an immediate thing that needed to be taken care of and we needed to stop the bleeding? Or is this something that was a bigger vision, was communicated with those people in the internal team, and then it happened? Because I think that those would make me feel two very different ways. I do believe from the conversations that I've had with Don Fall that he has a vision and he has good intentions, and hopefully will continue to grow the sport. If there was somebody that I would like have my faith in, he's one of them, just based on conversations and times that I met him. But again, it kind of boils down to, what is CrossFit's 1-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan? I'm not a business owner, but those are things that I develop for the life of Lauren Kalil, and I'm one person. Like I have vision boards and all of that like nerdy stuff because I want to see, am I reaching my goals? Am I reaching my benchmarks? Like, do I need to change course, or do I need to do something else to make sure that I hit my benchmarks? And I'm sure CrossFit has something of the sort of a vision written out on a whiteboard or whatever, but I think that there would be something to say about being public about that and letting the community know, well, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Is affiliate growth going to be up 50%, 10%? Where do you see the games growth? All of those little things. I have more questions than answers, and maybe that's just because... You
literally took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to say more questions than answers for me over here. I mean,
yeah,
a part of me tremendously sympathizes because new leadership coming in after the old regime, is it trying to clean up house so everybody's adhering to the new cultural shift? And, sometimes that's challenging, mixing the old with the new. The other conversation that at least I can't help but be curious about is, what is Eric Rosa's involvement? I mean, he has tremendous business experience with Oracle. He's removed himself from being forward-facing, but he's still the head of the board, so he's probably making the majority of executive business decisions. Is this pressure around the monetization of CrossFit because they lose so much around the sport? It's this constant deconstruct or separation around CrossFit health versus CrossFit sport versus affiliates, and trying to create boundaries and defining what the three of those are, because when you say CrossFit, it kind of jumbles them all together and creates confusion to the external world that's not in the space. The other thing that comes to mind is, where do you play the game of transparency? And I forget which TED Talk it was, but I was listening to a TED Talk, and, I like open communication. I like knowing what's going on. And they played a really contrarian point of view of, let's say you're in a CrossFit gym and you're doing your Metcon, and somebody comes in holding a big rifle, or they're strapped. Are you now focused on the workout? Or are you constantly keeping an eye on like, hey, what's going on over there?
For sure.
Right? And like, that's a version of transparency that may elicit worry. It may elicit fear. It may elicit uncertainty. And I'm not categorizing it as right or wrong, but it's a form of transparency. You know what's going on over there. And sometimes knowing what's going on may not be the best for the community. So maybe it's a protection scheme based on CrossFit leadership to try to ensure, like, hey, behind the scenes, it's a little messy. We're working to try to clean it up. And, us having these layoffs is hopefully what's best for the future of the sport, and allows us to be a little bit more efficient with our funds so we don't have to fold our cards. But these are all just my speculations. And
but that's
I
all
know that
anybody
they've
has
got
right
a lot
now.
of moving. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of excitement ready to unfold. And it's really cool to see the prize earnings going up. I mean, sponsors are now really heavily involved in these athletes' lives. I'd probably say, what would you argue? Maybe the top 20 on both the male and female sides are doing this full time now, training 2 to 3 sessions a day, getting body work, doing appearances, doing things via marketed consulting and social media things for brands. That didn't exist back in the day. I mean, I came up from Valley CrossFit with the Valley girls, and Becca Voigt was coaching 8 hours a day, simultaneously working at a bank, trying to get her sessions in, and still kicking ass in all the different arenas. But the land of sponsorships didn't take on till later.
Well, it's funny to me when I think of somebody like Pat Vellner, who is still a full-time non-athlete and can compete at the level that he does in
also
podium
being a dad.
contention, being a dad. And it's almost more impressive to me that he can still do that and be potentially on the podium versus somebody who's a full-time athlete, maybe not a parent yet. And I'm just like, that is like a superhuman to me, but it's just so rare because the way that athletes can have sponsorships now and the way that social media and Instagram can be, where they have all of this influence to all of these people who, I mean, I fall victim to it. I see somebody, Kelsey Keel, ooh, a new pair of Fleos. Yeah, I'm going to go and buy those right now because that color is great and I know that they're comfy. But it just, I want to see the sport continue to grow. And I hear what you're saying about it might instill more fear if they are super transparent. And I'm going to be the first to say that I don't have the inside knowledge that maybe people think that I would have, but most of my thoughts and ideas with the things that we're talking about, they all come through speculation and watching different chess pieces move. But I am always very careful to connect dots that haven't already been connected, just because I've seen weird things happen before, and I never would want to like come out and give an opinion and be like, well, I see this dot and that means that they connect and then it leads to this, and then it almost create more fear, if that makes sense. But I don't even need full transparency. I need a little bit more. And I
think like a public statement to elicit, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we're comfortable with sharing right now. We're on your team. We want to support one another. We have the same goal and mission to advance the sport. All right, just keep it that simple. And obviously they'll have a little bit more context than I do. But going back to Vellner, I'm happy you mentioned him. I'm going to connect with him on Friday, actually. He's going to be on our show.
Oh, he's great.
Alan Watts has a really cool piece. I'll try to find it and text it over to you. But the premise of it is basically when you're solely focused on one thing, that thing inevitably kind of suffers because you smother it. This episode is brought to you by Mush. My friends over at Mush created an incredibly cool product of ready-to-eat overnight oats. And for those of you that listen to the podcast often, you know simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And Mush has done just that, as their products have no more than 7 clean ingredients that are dairy-free, gluten-free, with no added sugar. Mush started right here at Invictus, as they had a vision to create convenient, healthy, and clean nutrition. And this landed them on Shark Tank, where the famous Mark Cuban invested in them. Now they're found in retailers all over the country, including Costco, Sprouts, Target, and Whole Foods. Check out my friends over at www.eatmush.com. And what's interesting about Pat Vellner and in the past, Val Volberl as another great example is like the unique purpose. I know athletes that are full-time that waste a lot of time in the gym because they have the time to waste. But when you have time constraints or a Google Calendar that's filled, inevitably, in my humble opinion, you're more productive, right? What's the famous line? If you need to get something done, give it to a busy person. And I don't know. I've talked to Pat many times, and I see how he lights up when he talks about his wife. I see how he lights up when he talks about his kid. And the way he lights up when he talks about his coaching staff and his sponsors and his friendship and the fun rivalry with Brent Fikowski and the growing rivalry with Jeffrey Adler.
Yeah.
All the Canadians. And I don't know. Yes, like you, I'm really amazed because all those things are basically full-time jobs. And he's so passionate about his chiropractic care and, really servicing his patients and his clients to the best of his ability. But there's something to this thing around service to others that I think makes the training more meaningful. The dosage of concentration is so much higher because it's not just a physical change. It's not just pursuit of trying to win the CrossFit Games. It's I'm doing this so that I can optimize my state. So when I am a husband or I'm a father or I am a doctor, now my state is ready to give and ready to receive in the appropriate fashion to positively impact the world. And I think that is very magical.
I love that because, I mean, if you think about anybody as a professional athlete, yeah, it is a very selfish journey. When you think about, I need to do everything to maximize my body, what I'm consuming, recovery, fitness. And I think you're onto something when having other buckets that give you life and fill your cup, probably make it more rewarding, at least in the long term. Maybe not immediately for that short gratification, but I think that it's just so interesting because even when you think of the younger athletes coming up right now, they are, and this is a whole other conversation maybe, but they don't really have any, I don't want to say they don't have other skills because I can't specifically speak to that. I don't know their other skills, but yeah, you look at somebody like Pat and he went to school and got an education and he's a chiropractor. And if God forbid he was injured and all of his sponsorships pulled the plug and are like, okay, we're leaving you. Well, what can he do now? Well, now he has I don't even want to say backup plan because it's not a backup plan. It's just his plan. The fear that I have for the next generation coming up is, what if that were to happen? What if, God forbid, there was a reason why they could no longer compete anymore? How could they financially be set up for themselves? And is there a way? I'm sure that they would be fine coaching at an affiliate and something like that. But I think it is an interesting conversation of 10 years from now when we look back, what will our thoughts be surrounding the younger
optimist
generation?
in me wants to say there's transferable skills, but then the other part of me is there's so many different modalities within CrossFit that it's really hard to get bored. When you're out of the gym, you're swimming, you're running, you're carrying, you're rucking, you're doing different modalities. When you're not doing that, you're probably doing different posts associated with your training. 90% of the time, you're probably in the gym. And there's so many different levels to the game and angles to the sport that the obsession percentage is very, very high. And I mean, you probably see it in the CrossFit space. I mean, there's certain people that I can communicate with in the CrossFit space. I'm like, whoa, there's depth to this person. I did not realize that by just looking at their social media, knowing just the tip of the iceberg of their story.
Yeah.
And then you talk to other people and it's like, everything is CrossFit and it circles back to CrossFit. And that doesn't make it wrong. Like CrossFit is such a broad and inclusive term, but life is really, really full. Like, I mean, Rogan talks about it and I echo this of like, man, I don't know if one life is enough. Like I still love food. I love movies. I love music. I love weather and outdoor things. I love connecting with people. I like beverages. Like there's so many angles. And then you get into conspiracy theories and extraterrestrial and you know, there's so many different angles and levels to the game that, I don't know, I think it takes a little bit of adversity to then shift that perspective a little bit. And when you're really focused on trying to get to that podium or peak expression, it can be a magical ride, but it can also be that famous Katrin Davidsdottir story where Ben Bergeron shared it around, she won. She did the thing. She got to the podium, came down, gave Ben a big hug and was bawling her eyes out and celebrated for a moment and then was like, what's next? Do we start training tomorrow?
Right.
And it's like, that's a challenge, right? And then is it like a drug fix where it's like, all right, I need to get to that thing again. Let's go play the game again. And then you realize like, whoa, that was really freaking hard. Or does that unlock different doors around, I'm going to still keep doing the thing, but now I also know this over here exists. I'm going to play over there too. And then I'm going to play over there. And does that serve as a distraction? I don't know. Right. And like, that's the game that I feel like gets to be played. And I mean, you saw it with Brooke Entz a little bit, right? Like she started down the CrossFit thing and then it unlocked other doors for her. And she decided to change the trajectory of her career. And I think there's numerous stories that are similar to that other people may or may not emulate. But I definitely think that it's a conversation and awareness that should be talked about, where don't get so specialized on one thing that you close yourself to all the other opportunities. You end up being a washed up athlete as you get older.
Well, and I think that the way that training camps are working now, where you see more and more athletes putting themselves into those environments. And I just right off the top of my head, I think of HWPO and any of those athletes that are going there. Well, to me, it's not even about like the relationships with the other athletes. Like, sure it is. But to me, the bigger thought is you're putting yourself in that environment with those athletes, with those coaches. You also have somebody who works over there like Matt O'Keefe, a manager. He has all of these connections. Everybody is so interwebbed that by putting yourself into an environment like a training camp, and I'm sure it's the same with Invictus, like all of the folks over there. I mean, the amount of connections that people have, that's what's really going to, I think, set some of these athletes apart from those who maybe just train alone in their own garage and aren't experiencing the lifestyle of being able to have those connections and that pool of a network.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the famous line, you're the average of the people you spend the most time with. And that's
yes,
not
you
just
are.
athletic development. That can be financial fitness, emotional fitness, habits and choices as well. And I definitely think we're onto something. There's a ton of knowledge to kind of unpack from that little tangent that we just danced on. When it comes to the season, what does your role kind of look like now? Like, will you be traveling to different events, kind of working behind the scenes with clips and athlete interviews? Are you guys going to be hosting remote podcasts? What's kind of the plan leading into the 2023 season?
So a little bit of everything. It kind of depends on the week because Sean and Tommy will help with some of the broadcast specifically for North America East and North America West. I believe those are the two that they're doing.
Nice.
And so basically they're going to do the broadcast. I'm going to go to North America East and North America West. And kind of my main job throughout the day of competition will be, writing down any big highlights or moments that I see and also getting athlete interviews. Winners, any big moments, that kind of stuff. And then I'll send that video back. We'll have editors that are going to be working remote. They'll get that on social media. They'll get that on YouTube. And then at the end of each night, myself, Sean, Tommy, and actually Brian Friend might join us for a couple of them.
Yeah, and you say he's just a friend.
Yeah. Oh, Sean loves playing that song for him.
I love it. Be friendly, Brian. Shout out to Brian Friend. We've had him on a few times, and Brian's I just poke the bear, and then I get out of the way as he just spits all the knowledge.
My brain wants to explode sometimes when he's talking about stats and all of these spreadsheets. Have you ever had access to any of his spreadsheets?
I think he's shared them when I've watched Savon a few times, and I've seen like the different analytics that he shows, and man, he goes deep. I mean, even the scoring system for Zalos games last year
my gosh,
was really cool just to see the interworkings of his mind. He's definitely bringing a really cool statistical analysis that raises my mind around, is that going to play a role in Vegas around CrossFit sports betting at some point?
Oh, wow. I mean,
maybe that's a multi-million-dollar idea that I've thought about that I just shared publicly. Sorry, Brian.
You got to text Brian immediately before this airs. But I have watched him develop those spreadsheets in real time. Like, I'll be on the phone with him. He'll be like, okay, I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to add all of this in. And I just cannot believe the things that are stored in his brain without needing to look at notes a lot of the time. I'm like, how are you built like this? I'm not. Wow. If you asked me even what the events were last year at the games, I would have to really sit and think, and then I'd probably have to go and cheat by going to the games website to look at the events. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that now, where he can rally off anything. But so the four of us will be about an hour after the close of competition, we're going to do a quick recap show. We don't know exactly what the format is going to be like quite yet, but it'll probably have some sound bites that I've gathered from athletes. We'll talk about big moments, maybe predictions, looking at the programming for the next day, like who do we expect to move up on the leaderboard, some of those different storylines, and content ideas. I think we'll develop just a fun YouTube show at the end of the day to give people a little bit more content to consume after watching a full day of competition. Oh, I can't wait. It just gets me so excited that we're back in person. I don't know about you. Sure. I hate virtual competition. Yeah. I'm so bored with it.
Yeah, same. I think it's going to be really cool to feel the energy out there. I also think the layouts are really cool. It helps to see like how people are progressing, and I think just the separation of lanes and seeing the grit of the athletes, it's very, very fun. And with that being said, I think you can anticipate what's coming next. What are your top 3 predictions for the podium in this year's pursuit of the CrossFit Games?
At the CrossFit Games, Bryce, there are not many hills that I die on. There truthfully are not. I could be persuaded to change opinions, but I would bet money, if anybody wants to place this bet with me, that Roman Krenikov will win the CrossFit Games.
You heard it here first, guys.
You heard it here first. Sean and Tommy do not agree with me, and that is okay. I will keep my thoughts, and I will put him on the top. I think Justin will get second. And I'm going to say Jeffrey Adler third, and I'll even put Pat Vellner is going to sneak in right behind him. And it's going to be one of those, like, he misses the podium because of a final event or something. And I hate saying that because I love Pat Vellner, but man, like, he has broken a lot of mirrors somewhere because the bad luck that follows him. It just like, what happened? Oh, I'll never forget Rogue with that. Was it thrusters or shoulder to overhead? And he just started failing reps. Otherwise, he would have had it in the bag. And
which is odd because his shoulders are so strong.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm hopeful. Do you think this is going to be Pat Vellner's last season?
I think it will depend how the podium shakes out and how close or if he is on it.
Yeah, totally. Every time I have him and Matt O'Keefe on, I joke that they get sunburned by opening the refrigerator.
Oh, no.
And so he'll definitely need to throw on some sunscreen if he's going to pursue that podium for sure.
Yeah.
I love talking a little smack to him a little bit. And I love the little controversy that him and Fikowski kind of go back and forth
I love it.
What are your thoughts on where Fikowski will shake up?
He's somebody who, I mean, his movement patterns and movement quality is just, I mean, it's A class. You cannot beat it. And he's just somebody that I really enjoy watching compete. And I enjoy watching his YouTube videos with how he moves and his movement pattern. I think he'll be in the top 10. I truthfully don't think he'll be in the top 5. I think we're kind of just
distance over time.
Yeah, it's just getting so competitive. It truthfully is that even to predict the top 10 on the men's field, and you could now say for the women's field as well, it's just the margins are so small.
Yeah,
and it's truthfully dependent on what is Boz going to program.
Yeah, for sure. Let's hop across the pond. What are your predictions for the top 3 on the women's side with Tia and Shane embarking on being parents this year?
Oh, man. I mean, so part of me, I don't know. This is something where I'm not going to die on the hill because I could be convinced either way. Part of me really would want CrossFit to just give Tia a ticket to the CrossFit Games. Hey, I know that you just birthed a child a few months ago, but if you want to come and compete, we're going to hold a spot for you. As a fan, part of me would be like, wow, that's like really cool. When I then think of, you are entering motherhood, that's probably not the smart decision for you, the baby, or Shane. I'm like, okay, maybe like she should take the year off and relax and be a mom. But part of me is like, oh, if like health and that stuff didn't really matter and she could just like compete, that could be cool. I think that it's hard because I go back and forth between Mel and Laura. I know with most certainty, one of them is going to stand at the top of the podium. It's going to be hard to convince me otherwise of that. I'm going to go with Mel, Laura in second. That third, this is where it gets hard for me. I have like 5 names in my head. Honestly, I think maybe Brooke Wells. And I don't think a lot of people would say that.
Say that.
Really?
Yeah.
I think
she's
that
just been
now
at the
that
top
she's
of mind, navigating, like coming back from her injury. I feel like she's got a little chip on her shoulder. The confidence is there. She's got reps on her body. The other downside, though, is with reps, with being injury free, you know, with that comes expectation. And expectation is heavy, right? When you don't have the expectation, you're just out there. You know, every event is like euphoric because you're performing better than anybody thought was capable. Yeah. It's like that underdog mentality, which is kind of cool.
But just knowing that last year she placed 5th and it was less than a year out from surgery, that says something to me.
Yeah, she's definitely a gamer. She performs really, really well. Do you think there's going to be like a highlight event, kind of like the sandbag clean? Like, do you think they'll pull over like a log from Rogue? I'm just trying to think some of the most notable events that we've seen in the last year or so, as far as like, you know, the home run hit, probably for like Danny Spiegel or somebody, or even Amanda Barnhart.
I think that there'll be some kind of strongman element, but in my head, I don't think it's going to be anything that we expect. Part of me, and I have not spoken to anybody about this. I have no inside source, but part of me thinks that Boz is working with Katie Henniger and those others at Rogue to come up with something, or because Katie and Bill, they also facilitate the Rogue, the Strong Women event that was at the Arnold. And I got to go this year, so I saw a lot of the events in real time. And in my head, my brain started thinking of, could any of these be implemented at the CrossFit Games?
That's a good point.
And I think that some of them could. The one that kind of sticks out in my mind, and again, it would depend on flooring. I suppose they could potentially do it outside, but it's the one they have. You could use just like a yoke or some kind of, what am I thinking of? Like a box, I suppose, where you pick up the Atlas stone, put it up or over the yoke or on top or over a block, and do that for reps. And I just remember watching it at the Arnold, and there were some athletes that could not even pick up the stone. Yeah. So I think that somehow that could potentially be implemented into an event if there is another strongman event. In my mind, I'm thinking of what can athletes almost not practice or manipulate at home. And that's where my mind starts going, and things that, how can Boz catch people off guard?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited. He's definitely brought in some cool modalities into the program design. The contrarian in me always gets frustrated that it leans towards gymnastics or strongman as opposed to like a dunk contest or a 3-point shooting contest or something from like some of the traditional sports that we're seeing. Yeah. But that's just the contrarian and the bias in me.
But I would like to see the hand-eye coordination of these athletes, because I will never forget at my first CrossFit affiliate, the best CrossFitter at our gym, the best, was absolutely terrible at baseball, basketball, golf, like any ball sports couldn't do, not to save his life. But in CrossFit, phenomenal. So I would really enjoy watching some of these athletes doing sports like that and just seeing how they maneuver.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we definitely see some really cool things, and I don't know. It's interesting to see where the sport of CrossFit is going. Based on your humble lenses, do you think the sport's going to continue to grow and maybe get back to its peak that maybe we saw in that 2017, 2018 realm?
I'm hopeful that it will, but in order to do that, I do believe and think we need more consistency, and we need to allow growth through consistency. The athletes need to know what to expect. The managers, the fans, the community. I think if we let things for a few years just be and have little minutia things change, I think that that is truthfully what's going to be the best for the sport in the immediate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Consistency, try to really optimize the systems a little bit, become a little bit more efficient. And I don't know, I feel like everybody needs a little bit of time to find their way a little bit. When it's always changing, it's a little bit chaotic to always play catch up rather than just kind of refining some of those same skills that get practiced year after year. Man, it was so fun to chat with you today, Lauren. It was really cool to understand some of your story, understand your growth and development within production and media, and knowing now that you're in a safe space with Talking Elite Fitness. I love all the things that you guys are doing. You rig shakers, you.
Oh, we are. You get the four of us on a rig. Oh my God. Hopefully it's bolted in good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What are some final thoughts that you'd love to share with the community kind of moving forward?
Gosh, I hope people come to semifinals. I hope that I can look at those stands and see the community rallying behind essentially a mini CrossFit Games. And for those who maybe can't take off during the CrossFit Games, or they can't financially get there or geographically get there, go to one of the semifinals, because these, as great as the broadcast is, and I work with a lot of people on the broadcast team, it's such a different experience to actually be there in person. And I encourage all of the members at my gym, like, hey, if you can go for a couple of days to the games, or, go for a weekend at semifinals, you should. Like, as a fan, even if there's not a specific athlete you're excited to see, you meet so many amazing people. And that's honestly sometimes more than even what I'm doing for my job by interviewing athletes. One of the big highlights for me is all of the people that I get to catch up with there, like between you and I'll see Brian and Tommy and Sean in person. But then people that come up to me and are like, oh my gosh, like, I watched your YouTube videos, I love this. And then I have a conversation with them and I get to meet them and hear about their affiliate and their experience. And is truly something special about being a part of this community and meeting people in person. And gosh, it's just so much fun.
I couldn't agree more. And quite frankly, they're the fittest fans on earth. You see so many jacked people in the in the stands looking down on more jacked people. And it's cool to get to know people's stories and how they relate or don't relate. And it's cool to just be in the presence of people trying to maximize their human potential and get to their North Star. And it was so cool to chop it up with you today and really catch up and officially have you on the show. I've admired you for so long, and I'm so excited for what's to come for you and the crew.
Thank you, Bryce. I appreciate it. I feel so honored to have been invited here.
It's so cool. For those of you observing on YouTube or listening on Spotify and Apple, if you enjoyed my conversation with Lauren Kalil today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. Are you over 35 and in need of a solid training program? Are you looking to improve your athleticism and keep up with the younger athletes in your CrossFit gym? Then look no further than our Invictus Masters program. This program places year-round emphasis on mobility and stability exercises with movements that we have seen directly benefit our Masters athletes. Our program is led by Nicole DeHart and offers a training program designed specifically for Masters athletes who are looking to compete at a higher level in the sport of CrossFit. Some of our top Masters athletes in the world train with us, including CrossFit Games champion Kevin Kester, Matt Beals, and Pat Sprague. You can learn more about their stories and the Invictus Masters program by checking out their episodes right here on the Invictus Mindset Podcast. If you'd like more information about the current training cycle or to join the Invictus Masters program, please email Nicole at invictusathlete.com. That's Nichole at invictusathlete.com.